I'm a 28-year-old woman, and for as long as I can remember, Christmas hasn't been about family or joy. It's been a performance, a power play orchestrated by my mother. Every year, she turned gift-giving into a spectacle, a carefully staged event where she played the role of the generous, doting mother. For my younger brother and sister, Christmas morning meant piles of expensive presents, brand new gadgets, designer clothes, the latest gaming consoles. One year, my brother got a car, a whole car. For me, the gifts were never just bad, they were humiliating. A pack of off-brand socks, a thrift store sweater 2 sizes too big, self-help books about finding direction in life. When I was 16, she gave me a weight loss guide for teenage girls, even though I wasn't even overweight. I remember sitting there holding that book while my siblings unwrapped the latest iPhones. My mother beamed at me, waiting for me to thank her. The room was full of family, relatives who laughed awkwardly, who looked away, who pretended not to see the blatant favoritism. If I dared to show even a flicker of disappointment, she had a rehearsed response ready. "You should be grateful for what you get," she'd announced to the room. Some kids don't get anything at all. So, every year the same script. If I smiled and played along, I was finally maturing. If I looked upset, I was spoiled and selfish. It didn't matter what I did, she always won. My dad never stepped in. He'd sit there, sipping his coffee, telling me later not to take it personally. The second I turned 18, I started building my escape. I took extra shifts at work, saved every penny, and moved out the moment I had enough to rent a small apartment. I stopped going home for Christmas, citing work, or travel plans. It took a few years, but eventually I carved out a life for myself. A career, a place of my own, a sense of peace. Then came the guilt trips. "You're ruining the family," my mother would say over the phone. "Your siblings miss you. Do you really want to break us apart like this?" It took a while, but she wore me down. I convinced myself that maybe, after all these years, things had changed. Maybe she had changed. I agreed to come home for Christmas. That year was a mistake. The decorations were the same as always, twinkling lights, a towering tree, a table stacked with expensive gifts. My mother greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The gifts were handed out, one by one. My sister got a designer purse, my brother a top-of-the-line laptop. When it was my turn, my mother handed me a single envelope, a wide grin on her face. I opened it. Inside was a printed-out list, life tips for late bloomers. Certain lines had been highlighted, advice about better money management and taking responsibility for your future. I stared at the paper, then looked up. My mother was watching, waiting. I didn't react. I smiled, tucked the paper back into the envelope, and thanked her. She looked almost disappointed. She wanted me to crack, to lash out, to cause a scene, to play the role of the ungrateful daughter so she could deliver her favorite line. I knew this would happen, but I had already started planning my revenge. Over the years, I had worked my way up the corporate ladder. I made smart investments, stayed out of debt, and built a financial stability my parents had never managed. My mother spent money recklessly, big vacations, designer clothes, expensive furniture, always flaunting wealth she didn't have. She had built an image of success, but I had started noticing cracks in the foundation. Then, a few months ago, I found out the truth. I was catching up with an old family friend who worked in finance when they casually mentioned something about pre-foreclosure notices. My mother's name had come up in a list. I checked for myself, and there it was, her house was about to be taken by the bank. The same house where she had humiliated me every year. The house where she had held her power over me for so long. It didn't take long to confirm everything. My father had always been bad with money, but this time, my mother's reckless spending had caught up with her, and the bank wasn't giving her a way out. The moment I saw that notice, I made a decision. I met with a lawyer, went through the legal channels, and positioned myself perfectly. By the time the foreclosure was official, I was ready. I placed a winning bid at the auction. The house was mine. This year, Christmas would be different. My mother always used gifts as weapons. She made the holidays about control, about making sure I knew my place. But this time I had the ultimate gift for her, a neatly wrapped manila envelope. Inside were the foreclosure papers. Inside was proof that I now owned her house. And this Christmas, in front of everyone, I was going to give her the one thing she had given me my whole life, a lesson in humiliation. Update 1. The Christmas gathering unfolded just like it always did. Lavish decorations, a dining table stacked with food, and my mother in full performance mode, making sure everyone knew she was the perfect hostess. She floated around the room, laughing, fixing plates, ensuring everyone had a drink in their hand, acting like she wasn't drowning in debt. The gift exchange started the way it always did, my mother making a big show of handing out presents, making sure everyone saw just how thoughtful she was. My younger brother unwrapped a sleek new gaming laptop, while my sister gasped over a high-end designer handbag. Even my father got something extravagant, an expensive watch that he turned over in his hands like he wasn't sure how she'd afforded it. Then it was my turn. My mother smiled as she handed me a single wrapped package, the same patronizing grin she always had when she was about to make a point at my expense. I pulled at the cheap wrapping paper and opened the box. Inside was a self-help book about forgiveness and a dollar store planner. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. My aunt, the only one in the family who never played into my mother's act, raised an eyebrow. I smiled, held up the book, and nodded. Thank you. My mother's grin faltered just for a second, like she had expected me to react differently. Maybe a flash of hurt, maybe an embarrassed outburst. But I had played this game too many times. I tucked the book back into the box and placed it beside me. Then I reached under my chair and pulled out my gift for her. A neatly wrapped box, bigger than the one she had given me, tied with a gold ribbon. The second my mother saw it, her expression changed. She lit up, eyes gleaming as she carefully untied the ribbon and pulled open the box. She probably thought I had finally come to my senses, that I had given in, that maybe I had splurged on something extravagant to make up for all the years of ungratefulness. She reached inside and pulled out the stack of papers. For a moment, she didn't register what she was looking at. Her manicured nails flipped through the pages slowly, her face shifting from pleased to confused. Then she stopped. Her mouth twitched, her fingers clenched. The color drained from her face. The room, which had been filled with laughter and chatter just moments before, went silent. I leaned back in my chair, speaking clearly so everyone could hear. Since the house was going into foreclosure, I stepped in and bought it before the bank could sell it to a stranger. So now I own it. A sharp intake of breath. My father froze. My brother and sister looked between me and my mother like they had just walked into the middle of a horror movie. My aunt, who had been sipping her wine, actually let out a laugh and quickly covered her mouth. My mother's hand shook as she flipped through the papers again, her eyes darting over the legal documents like she was hoping to find a loophole, a mistake, something that would undo what she was reading. But there was nothing. It was real. Then the screaming started. She shot up from her chair, gripping the papers so tightly that they crumpled in her hands. Words poured out of her. Fast and furious, accusations, insults, outrage. How dare you do this to me? You think you're so smart, don't you? Buying my home? You're trying to humiliate me in front of my family. It wasn't just anger, it was full-blown hysteria. She slammed the papers onto the table, her chest heaving. Some of the younger cousins watching from across the room looked scared. My brother clenched his jaw, but didn't say anything. My sister, still clutching her new designer bag, sat frozen like she was afraid of getting dragged into it. My mother turned, looking for someone to back her up. She locked eyes with my father, waiting for him to step in, to defend her. But for the first time in my life, my father actually spoke up against her. I told you this was going to happen, he muttered. You never listen. The rage on my mother's face flickered for just a second, replaced by something else, something closer to panic. She turned back to me, voice shaking. You can't just do this. You can't just take my home away from me. I didn't react. I reached for my glass of water, took a sip, and set it back down before I spoke. I didn't take it, I said, keeping my voice calm. You lost it. A few people in the room looked away, pretending to check their phones. Others were watching closely, barely blinking. My mother's hands balled into fists. You wanted this, she hissed. You waited for this moment. I didn't argue. The meltdown escalated fast. My mother grabbed the stack of papers and threw them across the room. The pages scattered over the floor, sliding under chairs and across the carpet. She was shaking, her entire body vibrating with rage. What do you expect me to do? I didn't flinch. I expect you to either start paying rent or find another place to live. Silence. For the first time, my brother spoke. His voice was tight. So what happens now? I leaned back, unfazed. That's up to her. My mother's breathing was rag. Then, as if she was trying to regain control, she straightened up and smoothed out her dress. She looked at me, eyes burning. I will never pay rent to you. She said it like it was a declaration, like she thought saying it out loud made it true. But it didn't. Because in my hands, I held all the power now. And whether she liked it or not, things were about to change. Update 2. The moment my mother threw the foreclosure papers across the room, Christmas was officially over. The stunned silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. A few relatives tried to salvage the evening, awkwardly refilling their drinks or forcing conversations, but it was useless. The energy had shifted. My mother stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her so hard that one of the ornaments on the Christmas tree rattled off and hit the floor. My brother shot me a murderous look, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, while my sister sat frozen, gripping the handles of her new designer bag like it was a life preserver. My father just sighed and rubbed his temples. The room cleared out fast after that. Some relatives exchanged quick goodbyes, clearly not wanting to get involved. A few looked at me with something close to respect, like they had just watched a long overdue reckoning unfold. My aunt gave me a small nod before slipping out the door, her smirk barely concealed. As I gathered my things to leave, my brother followed me into the hallway, cutting me off before I could make it to the front door. His face was red, his voice low and angry. He demanded to know why I had done this, why I had humiliated our mother in front of everyone. He wasn't asking because he didn't understand. He was asking because he didn't want to admit that he had benefited from her favoritism his whole life. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I let him rant, let him spit out accusations, let him call me heartless. Then I walked around him and left. Later that night, when the house was quiet, my father found me outside by my car. The cold air bit at my skin as he stood there, hands shoved deep into his pockets. He wasn't angry, just tired. He admitted that he had known this was coming, that he had tried to warn my mother, tried to tell her that she couldn't keep pretending their finances weren't a disaster. But she never listened. She never wanted to listen. I waited for him to ask me to back down, to reconsider. But he didn't. He just shook his head and told me, I wish things had gone differently. Then he turned and walked back inside. The fallout didn't stop there. Over the next few days, the calls started. First, from relatives. Some were cautious, feeling out where they stood in the family divide. Others came right out and admitted that they had always seen how my mother treated me and that, while they wouldn't say it out loud, they thought she deserved it. Then came the calls from my mother. Except she didn't call me directly. She called my workplace. One morning, my boss pulled me aside, barely able to keep a straight face as he told me about the voicemail she had left. She had ranted about my unstable behavior, warned them that I was manipulative and dangerous, and tried to convince them to reconsider my employment. My boss deleted the message before even finishing it. He told me it sounded like a bitter, desperate attempt at revenge. It didn't stop there. My mother tried to act like nothing had happened. She stayed in the house, going about her life as if it wasn't legally mine. She didn't acknowledge the foreclosure, didn't acknowledge the Christmas disaster. She carried on like I had simply made up the entire thing. My sister started distancing herself, torn between the mess unfolding in front of her and the reality she had been trying to ignore. My brother, he went the opposite route. He dug his heels in, furious at me, fully believing my mother's version of events, that I had blindsided her, betrayed her, and torn the family apart out of spite. It became clear that my mother had no intention of taking responsibility, no intention of moving out, no intention of acknowledging what had happened. So I gave her a legal reminder. The first eviction notice was delivered a few weeks later. The paperwork was airtight. She had no legal claim to the house, no lease, no standing. But she still refused to acknowledge it. That's when she tried one last desperate move. A relative reached out, claiming my mother wanted to make peace over lunch. The whole thing was staged, obviously an attempt to guilt-trip me, to manipulate me into backing down. I declined. That same night, I got a long, rambling voicemail. The tone shifted wildly. First, she was sobbing, begging me to fix this. Then she was furious, blaming me for ruining the family. By the end, she was demanding that I undo everything, as if I could magically reverse the foreclosure, as if she hadn't ignored every warning sign. I deleted the voicemail without responding. I made my boundaries clear. If she wanted to talk, she could do it through an attorney. She never reached out again. It was clear now, this wasn't going to end quietly. My mother wasn't going down without a fight. Update 3. The eviction notice arrived, but my mother acted like it didn't exist. She went into full-blown denial mode, telling anyone who would listen that it was all a misunderstanding. She spun the story her way, claiming I was confused and bluffing to make a point. According to her, there was no way I'd actually follow through. She told my siblings that I had some kind of vendetta, that I was trying to punish her for being a strict mother. My brother ate up every word. The calls started first, then the texts. At first, they were disguised as concern, asking if I had really thought this through. That didn't last long. The messages quickly turned into full-blown rants about how I was destroying the family and making mom homeless over a stupid grudge. I ignored them. Then the messages got nastier. He called me selfish, cruel, a heartless traitor who was ruining Christmas for everyone. He sent long, angry paragraphs, one after another, sometimes in the middle of the night. I blocked him. My sister, on the other hand, took a different approach. She wasn't angry, just hesitant. She admitted that our mother had been unfair for years, but pleaded with me to find another way. She wanted me to be the bigger person, to stop things before they got worse. I didn't argue with her. I just reminded her that our mother had already ignored every warning and that this was the result. My sister went quiet after that, not picking a side but slowly pulling away from the situation. My mother didn't stop there. When she realized she wasn't getting through to me, she turned to my father. She demanded that he fix this, but for once, he didn't take her side. He refused to get involved, told her she had brought this on herself. That threw her off completely. She had always expected him to back her up, to play peacemaker. So, she tried something else. A few days later, I got a letter from a lawyer. Except calling them a lawyer was generous. It was a family friend of hers who probably Googled eviction laws 10 minutes before drafting the letter. The wording was weak, full of vague threats and dramatic language about a daughter's duty and emotional distress. I sent it straight to my lawyer. He laughed. Then he reassured me that she had no case. No lease, no legal claim, nothing. If she wanted to fight this, she'd be wasting money she didn't have. That must have been the moment reality finally set in, because that night, she left me a voicemail. Her voice shook. She was sobbing, begging me to fix this, to undo it somehow. It was the same cycle she always followed: rage, denial, then desperation. She tried everything: pleading, blaming, guilt-tripping. I didn't respond. The final eviction notice was served a few days later. The sheriff's department made it official. She had 30 days left. No more excuses. No more games. She had lost. And now she had to face the consequences. Update 4. The eviction deadline was approaching, but instead of looking for a new place, my mother doubled down on her theatrics. She told everyone who would listen that she was being forcibly removed by her own daughter. The story changed depending on who she was talking to. To some, she was a helpless victim, abandoned after years of sacrifice. To others, I was some heartless villain who had swooped in to steal the house out from under her. She conveniently left out the part where she had ignored every warning, every overdue bill, every chance to fix her situation before it reached this point. And then she tried to go after my job again. One morning, my boss pulled me aside, barely containing his amusement. Someone had sent an anonymous email, filled with accusations about my unstable behavior and troubling history. It was a mess of lies, clearly an attempt to get me fired. My boss read it out loud, shaking his head, before deleting it on the spot. We both knew exactly who sent it. But my brother took things even further. Since I had blocked him on everything, he found another way to lash out. One evening, as I was leaving work, he was waiting in the parking lot. He stood near my car, arms crossed, jaw clenched. I didn't stop. I walked past him like he wasn't even there. That's when he exploded. He started shouting, demanding that I fix this. People turned to look. Security stepped in immediately. When he refused to calm down, they escorted him off the property. HR was notified. They assured me that any further incidents would be handled. That was the last time I saw him. Security called the cops to issue a formal warning. That was the final straw for me. I blocked him on every possible platform. No calls, no texts, nothing. After that, my sister reached out. She apologized for our brother's behavior but still tried to convince me to be the bigger person. I let her talk, but I didn't waver. Then came my mother's next move. She suddenly decided she wanted to talk. Except, instead of reaching out directly, she used our aunt as a messenger. She acted like she was finally ready to make peace, pretending that she just wanted a simple conversation. I didn't fall for it. But then things took a turn. A friend of mine who lived nearby called me one evening with a warning. They had overheard my mother ranting to a neighbor, saying that if she had to leave, she was going to destroy the house first. I didn't take the threat lightly. I hired a property inspector to document everything. Every wall, every fixture, every appliance. But I wanted a full record of the house's condition in case she followed through. My lawyer reassured me that if she caused any damage, she could be sued and possibly arrested. The final eviction deadline was coming fast. I expected her to make a scene, to fight, to drag it out. But no one expected what she did next. On the last day before she had to leave, my mother made her most unhinged move yet. Update 5. The eviction deadline was less than 48 hours away when my mother made her most unhinged move yet. I got home from work that evening and immediately noticed something was off. The lock on my apartment door wasn't broken, but it felt different. I stepped inside, and that's when I saw it. My drawers had been rifled through, my cabinets left slightly ajar, and a few things were missing. I checked my valuables first. My laptop, jewelry, and anything expensive were still there. But when I went into my closet, my stomach dropped. A box that had been buried in the back, full of old family heirlooms and childhood photos, was gone. And so were my spare house keys. I checked my security cam footage. Sure enough, there she was, my mother. She must have still had an old copy of my apartment key from years ago. She had let herself in while I was at work, taken what she wanted, and left. I called the police immediately and reported the break-in and theft. When they arrived, they took my statement, checked the security footage, and confirmed that my mother had unlawfully entered my apartment. Because she still had an old key, it was considered unauthorized entry rather than forced break-in, but the stolen items made it a criminal matter. The officers contacted her directly, warning that if she didn't return the stolen property immediately, I could press formal charges for theft. Instead of denying it, she went on a tirade, insisting that the items were rightfully hers. The police told me they could move forward with an arrest if I wished to pursue it, but I opted to give her a final chance to return the items before escalating further. The next morning, a package showed up at my apartment. Half of my stolen belongings were inside. The rest, still missing. I followed up with the police, and this time, they didn't give her another warning. The report was officially processed, and she now had a criminal case on her record. I didn't wait around to see if she would escalate further. That same night, I changed all my locks, got security cameras installed at every entrance, and alerted my landlord. I wasn't taking any chances, but she wasn't done. The next morning, eviction day, the police and a court officer arrived at the house to enforce the final removal. A neighbor texted me that my mother was still inside, acting like nothing was happening. When they knocked on the door, she refused to answer. It wasn't until the officers announced they were coming inside that she finally opened it, and then the screaming started. She sobbed. She begged. She wailed that this was her home, that I was kicking her onto the streets. She called me every name in the book, accused me of betraying her, of being a soulless, heartless daughter. None of it worked. The sheriff's deputies remained firm. The court officer handed her the final paperwork. This was no longer a discussion. Then she turned to me. She locked eyes with me, her face twisted in rage. "You'll regret this for the rest of your life." The officers gave her 10 minutes to collect her things. That was when she finally realized there was no way out of this. She grabbed a few bags, shot me one last glare, and left. But the damage was already done. After she was gone, I walked inside the house, and my stomach dropped. She had trashed the place before leaving. Windows were broken. Fixtures had been ripped out. Bleach had been poured onto the carpets. The walls had scratches and dents, and the kitchen sink had a massive crack in it. I called my lawyer immediately. Within the week, we filed a property damage lawsuit against her. The estimated cost to repair everything? Over $20,000. As for my mother, she ended up moving in with a distant cousin, one who barely tolerated her. And for the first time in my life, I had something I never thought I'd get: peace. Update 6. The lawsuit moved fast. My lawyer wasted no time filing for property damages after seeing the mess my mother had left behind. The estimate for repairs? Just over $20,000. She ignored the first legal notice, then the second. But she couldn't ignore the court summons. The court date was expedited, forcing her to deal with the consequences much sooner than she expected. When the day arrived, she walked in with the same act she had always used, tears in her eyes, looking small and pitiful, hoping to win sympathy. She played the victim, claiming she had been forced out of her home, that she was destitute, that she had nowhere to go. She painted me as the villain, the cruel daughter who had stolen the roof over her head out of spite. But then my lawyer presented the evidence. High-quality photos of the damage, the repair estimates, the documented threats she had made to destroy the house. The judge barely had to deliberate. The ruling was clear. She was found liable and was ordered to pay the full amount in damages. She had 90 days to pay up. The moment the decision was announced, my mother lost it. She jumped to her feet, screaming about how I had set her up, how the entire system was against her. She called me a soulless monster before storming out of the courtroom, slamming the door so hard the judge had to pause before moving on to the next case. But it didn't end there. She refused to pay. No surprise there. My lawyer immediately filed for wage garnishment, but since she had no steady job, that wasn't an option. Instead, we secured a judgment lien against any future assets she might obtain. Translation: if she ever came into money, whether from an inheritance, a settlement, or even her own tax returns, I would get my cut first. After that, I cut all contact. I blocked her. I blocked my brother. I blocked every enabler who tried to guilt-trip me into forgiving her. For the first time in my life, I was free. The repairs took time, but eventually the house was restored. My finances remained intact. And my mother? She burned every bridge she had left. She ended up crashing with a distant cousin who barely tolerated her. No one else wanted to take her in. And me? I moved on. Completely.